Today, I'm going to explain how small habits that you might do every day, every week, or every month, which could possibly be killing you, can actually make a real difference in your life and truly mark a before and after, especially when it comes to your retirement. These small changes really won't require much effort from you unless you're a weak person, but they can truly help you become financially free, or even a millionaire or multimillionaire, depending a bit on how you go about it. These habits can be things like, for example, smoking. If you're someone who smokes, generally people who smoke quite a bit usually go through a pack a day. Let's say that a pack a day costs about $5 on average. $5 times 30 days in a month, we're talking about $150. That's $150 a month that you're spending every month on cigarettes. $150 a month, which over the course of a year adds up to $1,800 that you're spending annually on cigarettes. For example, in Spain, the average salary might be around 1,500 euros per month. 150 euros a month would be about 10% of your salary. 10% of your salary, which you're spending on slowly killing yourself from the inside, spending it on something that really doesn't do you any good. And that 10% of your salary is exactly what top economists, major banks, and large investment funds usually say people should save every month. It's always been recommended, especially in Northern European and American culture, that you should save at least 10% of everything you earn. Here, for example, as we can clearly see, if you're someone who smokes, you're spending 10% of everything you earn on tobacco. Now, you might say to me, okay, David, but I don't smoke. So this example you're giving doesn't apply to me. Okay, you don't smoke, but you probably go out partying every weekend to drink, to get drunk, to pay for entry to a nightclub, or maybe you go out every 2 weeks, or at least once a month you definitely go out. And when you go to a nightclub, just the entrance fee already costs money. The alcohol, the mixed drinks you have, they all cost money. And then it also depends a bit on the habits you usually have when you go out partying, right? If you drink a lot of alcohol, if you buy drugs, if you go out partying once, twice, 3, or even 4 times a week, it all depends a little. But I'm sure that if you're someone who goes out partying and drinks alcohol or does drugs, you're spending at least $150 or euros a month on alcohol, drugs, or nightclub, something that's also harming your health. Drinking alcohol is bad for your health. So if you have any of these bad habits, whether you're spending money on tobacco every day, every week, every month, on alcohol, on drugs, on partying, on bad habits that really aren't doing anything for you. Or even if you say to me, hey David, look, I don't smoke, I don't drink, I don't go out partying, but it's true that I eat out a lot. I go to restaurants a lot. Well, eating at restaurants, usually if you go to a good restaurant and eat reasonably well, you're going to spend about 50 euros or dollars each time you go. That's 3 times. If you skip going out to eat or have dinner at a restaurant just 3 times, you're already saving those 150 euros or dollars every month. So with these $5 a day, 5 euros a day, or 150 euros or dollars a month, if you know how to invest it wisely, you can actually build financial freedom, wealth, or a retirement fund. In the end, we have to be responsible for our own lives and our own future. For example, I see this a lot here in Spain, which is the country I'm from, where people are far too confident about their retirement. They think, well, if I work, then I'll retire. And when I retire, the pension the government pays me will be what I live on. When in reality, the pension the government pays you is usually 40% less than what you used to earn in your salary. And besides, younger people like us don't even have any guarantees that we'll get that pension in the future. So basically, you're limiting yourself, you're limiting your life and your freedom to living dependent on a salary paid by the government. To me, that's not freedom. It's not living. It's nothing at all. When with these small habits that you can start applying from a young age, basically from the moment you start working, when you first start handling money, you should be using these habits so that one day you can say, wow, I have assets. I'm a millionaire. I have more than $1 million in the bank in assets, or whatever you want, right? I usually always recommend having it invested, since keeping your money in the bank just lets inflation eat away at it and you end up losing all your money. So how can we do what I'm telling you about? Quit smoking. Instead of spending $5 every day on cigarettes, I'm going to invest that money every day in my retirement, in my financial freedom, in my assets. Every day, I'm going to take $5 and invest it, for example, in Bitcoin. Since we're here on a channel where we talk about finance and often discuss cryptocurrencies, let's talk about Bitcoin. What would have happened with Bitcoin? Let me give you an example. If over the past 4 years, we had taken $5 every day and invested it in Bitcoin religiously, every single day, every time you wake up, boom. Instead of 5 euros on cigarettes, 5 euros on Bitcoin. What would have happened? At the end of those 4 years, we would have invested a total of roughly $7,300. Out of those $7,300, in 4 years, they would have turned into $18,200. $18,200. Which obviously, if we subtract the investment we've been making over all these years, those 5 euros or dollars every day, we're talking about a profit of roughly $11,000. Not only would we have preserved the value of those $5 we've invested every day, but we would have generated an extra $11,000 in profit. This is just in the last 4 years. If we had done that, invested $5 in Bitcoin every day with $18,200, we would already have enough for a down payment on a property or to open an account in an investment fund and be able to keep doing the same thing but in an investment fund. Or, for example, invest in an index like the S&P 500, which, as we know, over the last 50 years has given an average return of around 10% per year, obviously with its ups and downs, some much better years and some much worse years, but its annual average is 10%. By doing this, taking $5 a day, which is $150 a month, I repeat, and diversifying them well, as I mentioned in this example with Bitcoin or with other types of assets that we'll look at now, we'll really see how, with the effect of interest, compounding, and the long term, we can end up becoming financially free. If we had done the same thing with Bitcoin, but instead of doing it for 4 years, we had done it over the last 10 years, from 2015 to 2025, which is where we are now, $5 every day. Instead of $5 on cigarettes, $5 on Bitcoin, what would have happened? We would have made a total investment of $18,260 over 10 years. That's what we would have invested. $18,260 that you invested in Bitcoin, which if you hadn't invested in Bitcoin, you would have spent on dying, on cigarettes. On what? On having yellow teeth, black lungs, ruined skin, your breath smelling like crap, and ending up dying and shortening your life. So instead of investing those $18,000 in your death, you invested them in Bitcoin. By investing in Bitcoin gradually, not only have you preserved the value of those $18,000, but you've also generated $85,800. $85,800. That's what you would have generated in 10 years if you had invested religiously, just as religiously as you go to buy your pack of cigarettes or your cocktails every weekend, but instead you invested in Bitcoin. You would have earned $85,000. $85,000, that's enough for a down payment on a good apartment, to buy something inexpensive, renovate it, sell it, and start your real estate cycle right there. Now, imagine doing this from a young age, starting at 20. By the time you're 30, you can start making bigger moves. You can start saying, hey, I have my own properties I'm buying and selling, properties I'm acquiring or mortgaging and renting out. Properties that pay for themselves, but at least now you have a foundation, at least you have some capital to get started with. But, for example, if you say, well, look, I don't want to invest everything in Bitcoin either because I consider it to be something very speculative. I believe that from now to 10 years from now, let's be realistic, from now to 10 years, and with the way everything is going with Bitcoin, it's quite possible that Bitcoin could reach $1 million. 10 years from now, we're talking about 2035. In 2035, it's possible that Bitcoin will be worth $1 million. Obviously, we're speculating, but it's likely. I even think it could happen sooner, by 2030. But anyway, let's say we're looking at a 10-year horizon. If we invest in Bitcoin with a 10-year outlook, with that perspective, right? Thinking about the future, saying, okay, so I'm going to invest $5 every day in Bitcoin for 10 years, considering that right now, Bitcoin is priced at $100,000. And I expect that in 10 years, it will be worth $1 million. And let's assume that Bitcoin has an average growth of $100,000 per year. Obviously, we know that's not really the case. We know there are good years, bad years, boring years, but let's say the annual average is $100,000 per year, which is how much it grows in 10 years. That way, we would reach $1 million in 10 years. According to this rule of 3, we would be earning approximately around, if we did all this, we would be earning around $60,000. $60,000 in profit, considering that we would have invested around $18,000. $18,000 is what we would have invested in Bitcoin with these $5 every month. $60,000 is the total of what we would have generated. That is, we would have made a profit of about $40,000 if we subtract what we invested. It's true that, well, apparently with Bitcoin's growth, it may not seem like much, but we're talking about building a foundation so that in the future we can have our retirement or financial freedom. And whether you like it or not, $60,000 is already an amount that right now you simply don't have. I mean, let's be realistic right now. In most cases, you don't have $60,000, but you do have $5 to spend on cigarettes. However, if those $5 that you do have to spend on cigarettes, you instead invest in Bitcoin over the next 10 years, in the end, miraculously, you end up with $60,000, or at least what you've invested. You've saved $18,000 and some dollars that you didn't have before, and now you do. But with this potential increase that we could see, we're talking about $60,000. $60,000 that already allow you to keep growing. Let's make it a bit more stable in the long term. These $5 every day, which is $150 a month, would be the minimum, really. The minimum, if you have even a little bit of financial knowledge or education, the least you should do in considering this life is to save 10% of what you earn on a daily basis. 10% of what you earn your salary, your paycheck, whatever it is, you should be investing it wisely for your future, for your retirement, for your financial freedom, so that when you're old, you can truly enjoy life and not be a slave. So if everyone did this, took those $150,000, I'm losing my mind. $150 every month and invested them. Let's make things a bit more realistic. Out of these $150, let's put $100 into the S, $550 into Bitcoin. What would we be achieving with this? Well, what we're investing in Bitcoin, it's the example I gave you, right? Something speculative, but at least you're saving in Bitcoin, you're increasing your units, and you're speculating that the price of Bitcoin might keep rising as it has up until now. In the case of the S&P 500, if you invest $100 every month, every single month, religiously, imagine on the first day of each month, boom, $100 into the S&P 500. On the first day of each month, boom, $100 into the S&P 500. We're talking about $1,200 a year that you're investing. If we do a simple calculation, taking into account that the S&P 500 has an average annual growth of 10%, we'd be talking about you earning $20,445 in the first 10 years. By then, you would have made a total investment of approximately $12,000, and you would have a total of $20,245. In 20 years, that investment, you've been making $100 every month into the S&P 500 religiously would amount to $72,498. In 30 years, it would be $208,000, and in 40 years, it would be $559,000. In other words, as we can see here, we're practically doubling every year or even a little more. If we looked ahead 50 years, which of course fewer people have that much time left, unless you're young, we'd already be looking at figures above $1 million. Roughly speaking, we'd be talking about $1.5 million. If you're a young person and you say, hey, look, I'm young, I'm 20 years old, and I still have 50 years ahead of me, well, by making this small gesture, maybe by the time you retire, you could have $1 million there. If you're not that young, well, we're talking about these time frames being a bit shorter. But even so, we can see that the returns are extremely high. With $100 invested every month in the S&P 500, in 10 years, that's $20,000. In 20 years, $72,000. In 30 years, $208,000. Now let's raise the bar a bit for people who have some savings, right? Who say, well, look, besides investing $100 every month, which I see as doable, it turns out I have $10,000 saved up under the mattress or in the bank, just sitting there doing nothing while inflation eats them away. Well, I'm going to use them as a starting point. You're going to use them as a base and put this $10,000 into the S&P 500. And besides having them as your base, you'll also be adding $100 every month. What this does is speed up the whole process. Just to give you an idea, if in 40 years we would have $559,000, we're talking about having over $1 million in those same 40 years. We would have approximately $1,010,000. So we'd already be speeding up the whole process. With this, you could already afford to retire. Keep in mind that reaching $1 million is usually the hardest part. Then, once you reach that amount, everything else depends on how you manage yourself. If you know how to manage well, you can live off that. For example, $1 million in the S&P 500 at an average annual return of 10% is already $100,000 a year. With $100,000 a year, for example, here in Spain, you can live very well. You can live very well, or at the very least, you could live in luxury, so to speak. Obviously, with this whole process, what we're talking about is that the goal is to reach an amount X that's large enough so that in addition you can alternate it with other types of assets. That is, you use Bitcoin as something speculative that grows, and the S&P 500 as something also speculative but more stable that also grows, where you can invest small amounts over a period of time so that when those amounts have grown enough, you can take those juicier sums and invest them in real estate, which is what I always mention to you, investing it in your first home. In other words, look, I'm going to buy this apartment that I found, which is cheap, needs renovation, and I can do a bit of remodeling to give it a completely different look and sell it for much more. Just imagine, for example, right? You say, hey, look, over these years, I've managed to save money by doing this simply by quitting smoking, quitting drugs, quitting drinking, stopping going out, partying every damn weekend. I've managed to save, let's say, 30,000 euros. I said, damn, I've managed to save 30,000 euros. And I've seen that there's an apartment that's really cheap. It's a bargain that just came up, although it's in terrible shape, of course, because if you buy an apartment that's brand new, that's in perfect condition. Well, surprise. What improvements are you going to make to it? What profit margin are you going to have? None. Like, it's already ready to move into, So the trick is to buy something that's in terrible shape, something where you can actually add value and really sell it for a higher price. So you have 30,000 euros saved up, $30,000 saved up. You take that and invest it in a property. There's an apartment for 50,000 euros, $50,000 just making this up. Hey, I'm short 20,000. Well, look, I'll ask the bank for a loan, see if they'll give it to me. And for that amount, they'll charge you low interest and the monthly payment will be very small. Or maybe I'll ask a family member, my dad, my mom, my uncle, whoever, to see if they can lend me that money to buy this apartment. Because look, the apartment costs 50,000, I have 30,000, so I'm missing 20,000 to be able to buy it. And you buy it. Once you buy it, you start fixing it up a bit, give it a makeover, and then sell it for a higher price. Imagine you've managed to increase its value by 30,000 euros. You bought it for 50, you made a small investment to fix it up a bit, say 5,000, 10,000 euros. So altogether you spend, let's say 60,000 euros, and you're going to sell it for, let's say 80,000 euros or a little more. But let's just say 80,000 euros. Now we're talking about a profit margin of 20,000 euros. So what do? You take it, sell it for 80,000 euros, and the first thing you do is pay back the loan you were given, and the rest you have left to do the same thing again. But now your pot of money is bigger. Now we're talking about how you started with 30,000 euros, and now you might have double that. Now you might have 60,000 double, and you do the same thing again. You buy another little apartment for 50,000 and do the same thing. But this time there's a big difference, which is that you no longer need to borrow money. Now you can do the deal on your own because you don't have 30,000 anymore. You have 60,000. You do the deal yourself. Boom. You invest all 60-50 for the purchase, plus 10,000 for little fixes and improvements you make. You sell it, boom, for 80. What do? You make 80. You do the same thing again. Each time the snowball gets bigger. There comes a point when between your salary or paycheck and the taxes you pay every year, plus every time you buy and sell a property, because you're paying taxes every time you do this, you're paying taxes on the capital gain, on the profit margin you make, and on top of that, the tax you pay when you buy a property. So from that moment on, the bank starts to see you as someone solvent. They say, hey, this guy is someone who pays taxes. He's someone who files his income tax return with his salary, with his job, with his company, or whatever it may be. And on top of that, well, he's making real estate transactions where he's paying his taxes and so on. From there, the bank starts to open a line of credit for you that will keep increasing, right? If you handle things well, it will keep increasing. In the end, just so you get an idea, at least here in Spain, the more taxes you pay, the more the banks open up to you, just so you get the picture. They open their legs even wider and say, how much do you want? Well, it's the same thing here. There comes a point when you can go and buy one property or several properties at once and say, hey, look, this time instead of buying one, I'm going to buy two at the same time. But to buy two, I'm short on money. I'll ask the bank. You ask the bank for a mortgage for one of them. You mortgage one and you buy the other outright. And the bank will give you the mortgage. And what happens from there? You're doing it with two at the same time. You sell them, you do the same thing again. With one, you handle 100% of the purchase, the renovation and everything. And the other one you mortgage. You do the same thing again. Then you'll be able to do it with three. And in the end, the snowball effect keeps growing because ultimately, just so you get an idea, the real estate sector is always booming. That is to say, maybe from today to tomorrow, or from today to 2 years from now, your property might not increase in value, but 10 years from now, your property will almost certainly have increased in value. And besides, there comes a point when you're making these kinds of moves, not just with two, but with three properties at the same time, when you say, well, look, two are for buying, renovating, and selling, and one is for buying, renovating, and renting out. And that's when you start adding properties to your portfolio. You start building up a property holding, you have your properties there, you rent them out, and you also start earning rental income. And then aside from your job, your businesses, or whatever else you do, you start receiving rental income in addition to your real estate deals. And from there, you just keep doing the same thing. With every batch of three properties you buy, you keep one for yourself to rent out. The other two, you renovate and sell to keep making money. You repeat the same process. And in the end, what happens? You generate liquidity with these transactions. And on the other hand, you keep increasing your real estate assets, which in turn generate rental income for you. And then, of course, on the other hand, you're also investing every week in Bitcoin, every week in the P500, and every week in gold, if you can. And in this way, with a small gesture, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, like quitting smoking those €5 or dollars a day that you're spending, end up turning into financial freedom for you in the medium and long term. In the short term, obviously, you're saving, you're taking action, you're trying to generate that capital, right? So to speak, that slightly larger capital, that amount, right? Of 20,000, 30,000 euros or dollars. But then from that point on, everything becomes much easier and everything starts to grow exponentially. In the end, it's about making small sacrifices where you spend 5 years saving and making small investments, whether in the P500, in Bitcoin, or in cryptocurrencies in general. And after 5 years, you start with your real estate moves, which are already larger. And after 10 years, you're already living off your own investments and are able to generate income and make this bigger and bigger. There comes a point when the time comes for you to retire, you say, wow, I've retired. And it turns out I don't know how many millions in assets, you know? I don't know how many properties that generate income for me. I have a savings fund in index funds or savings accounts with more than €1 million as well. I've also accumulated Bitcoin, and there comes a point when you say, now I can really live, you know? Like, I don't even care anymore. If the government doesn't pay me my retirement, doesn't give me my pension, I couldn't care less. Because the work I've done, what I've saved, has made it so that in the future, I can have a peaceful retirement and enjoy life. If I feel like traveling, I just go travel. If you feel like going out to eat somewhere, you go out to eat. If you feel like doing anything, you just do it. Why? Because you've earned it, because you've worked for it. And we're talking about small habits that can make all the difference for you. And people just don't do it. And a lot of people say, yeah, but I just can't quit smoking, I can't quit drinking, I can't give up my vices, I can't stop using drugs, I can't stop gambling, I can't give this up or that or whatever. All of that allow me to say this with all due respect to those of you who are like that, are weaknesses. If you're someone who says, I can't quit smoking, you are weak. If you say, I'm an alcoholic, I can't stop drinking, you are weak. If you say, I'm a drug addict, I can't quit drugs, you are weak. If you say, I'm addicted to gambling, I can't stop gambling, you are weak. If you're addicted to something, if there's something you're dependent on, you are weak. And this is the plain truth that you need to keep in mind. And I'm not saying it to offend you or anything. I'm simply telling you a hard, unvarnished reality. Whether you like it or not, if you're addicted to something and that thing controls you and you depend on it, you are a weak person. And if you are a weak person, you'll probably end up badly, because we're talking about habits that ruin your life. Smoking ruins your health, drinking ruins your health, doing drugs ruins your health, gambling ruins your financial health. And in the end, all of this leads to other kinds of problems, because all these issues end up getting worse. They end up affecting your family relationships, they end up affecting your romantic relationships, they end up affecting your finances and your family's well-being. And in the end, these are crappy little habits that many of you are hooked on, and you don't realize that you're ruining your life. And just by changing those crappy little habits that make you weak, you could, on the other hand, become rich, become a millionaire, achieve financial freedom. So think about it for a second. Open your mind a little and realize what's really worth it to you. Being able to achieve financial freedom and do whatever the hell you want in a healthy way, or spending your whole life miserable and rotting your health from the inside, screwing up your whole system, filling yourself with all kinds of crap like tobacco, alcohol, and drugs. Think about it, because with a change that starts in your mind, a small shift can improve your physical and mental health and also your financial well-being. Because right now, those small habits I'm telling you to change in order to improve your physical, mental, and financial health are actually doing the opposite. They're ruining your physical, mental, and financial well-being. A small change, $5 a day. Get that into your head. Just like you have $5 a day to put crap into your body, you also have $5 a day to invest in your retirement and your financial freedom. So if you found this video helpful, as always, I'd appreciate it if you give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others. And as you can see down here, we've just opened a new Instagram account for Ohana Finanzas, so follow me there. Our old Instagram account was taken down, it got banned, so we had to open a new one, Ohana Finanzas. Follow me here because we'll be posting things more frequently on this account. Also, follow us on the official Telegram group, Ohana Finanzas Official, and I'll see you in the next one. Big hug, and see you next time.